بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وبعدهم. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the tawfiq to fulfill and complete our previous video regarding the introduction of Aqeedah al-Tahawiya, in which we covered the life of Imam Tahawi radiallahu an, and his early life, his later life, the works that he did serving the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, and how he switched from the Shafi'i madhab to the Hanafi madhab, and how him and his teachers, they were related to Imam al-Shafi'i, and how him overall and the family that he was in, they were all interlinked together with the likes of Imam al-Shafi'i, Imam Abu Hanifa, Abu Yusuf, Muhammad al-Shaybani, etc. radiallahu anhum ajma'in. And alhamdulillah, inshallah, in today's video, we will be carrying on with the text of Aqeedah al-Tahawiya, along with the mukhtasar commentary regarding certain points, inshallah. And we will carry on from there, inshallah, from where we left off. And regarding previous videos, just wanted to clarify a point regarding where I said that there is no ikhtilaf within usuluddin. What I mean by that is that within Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, you have al-Ash'ariyah, you have al-Hanabila, and within the Ash'ariyah you have the Ash'aris and you have the Maturidis. And even though in reality they are the same, the Ash'aris and the Maturidis, they do differ on certain matters. Okay, a few matters. If you read this book called The Differences Between Ash'aris and Maturidis, you'll find the full list of differences that have been listed in that. And even when we read regarding the statements of Imam Taqiyuddin as-Subki's son, Tajuddin as-Subki radiallahu an, and what he said regarding the manhaj, the Aqeedah, regarding Imam Tahawi and what he wrote in Aqeedah al-Tahawiyah, he said if he found it to be on the same manhaj, on the same Aqeedah, same beliefs as Imam Abu Hanifa and his students and the Hanafi madhab. And within that, there was certain differences, around 13 differences. Some were lafdhan, some were ma'nawan. However, they weren't matters, they weren't such matters of discussion or disagreement that if one was to disagree on them, then they would tabdi' one another, or they would excommunicate one another from the religion of Islam. So in that way, the Hanabila, the Asharis and the Maturidis, in terms of usuluddin, in terms of i'tiqad and beliefs, in terms of the usul, in terms of aqeedah, they do differ on certain things. However, they agree to disagree. It's not like they're deviants or anything like that. No, they do disagree with each other on certain things regarding how they interpret Allah's attributes and certain beliefs as well. However, they all agree to each other to be a part of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Okay? And in that, there is no clash then within Ahl Sunnah, because then we say Ahl Sunnah is one. Al-Hanabila, Al-Ash'ariyah, which includes the Maturidis and the Asharis. So in that way, they're all three of them, they're the same essentially, okay? In the fact that they all agree and they're all part of Ahl Sunnah, okay? They're all Ahl Sunnah. Even though despite their differences, which is still, that's minus, that's not that deep. And that is what I wanted to clarify last time. And inshallah, we'll now be taking the next, we'll be reading the next part regarding Usuluddin and regarding what Imam Tahawi said regarding in his Aqeedah Tahawiyah regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his attributes, etc. So just before we carry on, just wanted to discuss the matter of Usuluddin itself. So the word Usul, it comes from the word Asl, and Asl literally means the foundations or the roots of something, of anything. So Usuluddin, this translates to the principles, the foundations of the religion. And this is also another word for Aqeedah. And the word Aqeedah, it comes from the word Aqd, and that literally means to tie. And this is in reference to when a believer, when he has certain beliefs regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, regarding Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his heart, then he holds on to it firmly and tightly. Because the word Aqd literally means to tie. And when you tie on something, then you tie it firmly and you don't allow it to loosen and you don't allow it to tighten up any further. So it's fixed on the position that it is, and you don't allow anything else new to enter. And when we are talking about the word Aqeedah, in terms of beliefs and what we hold regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, etc., we mean that we don't allow any new innovations to enter our heart regarding the beliefs and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. etc., and everything else. Unlike, for example, the Mu'tazila, the Jabariya, the Qadariya, the Jahmiya, and other sects like this. And obviously, you have the Shia, and you also have Salafiyya. So you don't allow any new innovations to enter our heart, unlike those sects. So yeah, and the word usul, like I said, it comes from foundations or the roots of something. And when we talk about Aqeedah, like I said, it is usuluddin. It's from the principles of religion. And problem nowadays is that certain people, they will take matters of fiqh and matters of ikhtilaf in secondary matters, matters of furu', into matters of Aqeedah. And they'll blow things out of context. For example, a brother may be doing Rafa Yadain, and you might be a Shafi, and unfortunately you might have another brother. Unfortunately, this happens a lot within our Pakistani Indo-Pak subcontinent people in the norms, that if you're doing Rafa Yadain, then they're going to think that you're a wobbler or that you're part of Salafiyya, which is really stupid, because a person can be a Shafi and an Ashari and still criticize a Salafiyya, which is totally valid. And we have many ulama like this today, and even people who are part of the Hanbali madhab as well. They do Rafa Yadain, they follow the true manhaj of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal radiyallahu an, and they'll still criticize Qarn al-Shaytan, Ibn Abdul Wahhab. So you need to understand that matters of fiqh and stuff like this, which aren't related to Aqeedah, these are secondary matters, and they are known as matters of furu'. And the best way to understand this is that, for example, you have a tree, okay, you have the main stem of the tree, don't know what you'd exactly call it, but the main branch stem of the tree, which is the main body, and this can be seen as the asl, or you can say Aqeedah, or matters of usuluddin, right? So usuluddin and the matters of faith and the religion, which is the most vital thing, this is seen as the main branch, the main stem of the tree. Now the smaller branches and the twigs that it branches out into different things, these are known as matters of furu', secondary matters. For example, matters of fiqh. For example, how a person prays, whether they read behind the Imam, whether they read Al-Fatiha or whether they don't. Matters like this is matters of fiqh, and we will never say that these matters are matters of usuluddin. However, there are certain matters, for example, certain matters when, if a matter is agreed upon with consensus, with al-ijma', then for a person to contradict al-ijma' and to go against the ijma' of, for example, the Sahaba or the ulama, that this person would be excommunicated from the religion. And in many cases, majority cases, he'll be excommunicated from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah himself. Okay, for example, wiping the socks, leather socks, if a person is to disagree with this and say no, he doesn't believe in this, etc., then this will be him excommunicating himself from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, because it's written in Al-Hidayah, which is the sharh of the text of Imam Muhammad and Imam Quduri. And it has written basically that if a person doesn't agree with wiping the leather socks, then that person becomes a mubtadi, he becomes a part of Ahlul Bid'ah. So there are certain things that if they are agreed upon by the Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in and by the ulama, then if a person was to disagree with that, then he will take himself outside of the folds of Ahl Sunnah. And if if he's disagreeing regarding a certain matter of the religion, which can possibly put him at risk of losing his iman, then in that case, then he'll be excommunicated from the religion itself, and he'll become a kafir. It's simple as that. For example, it's in Fiqh al-Akbar, the Sharh written by Mullah Ali Qari, rahimahullah, in which he basically said that if a person disagrees with Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu an being the first Caliph of Islam and being the most Afzal person after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then this person himself, he will be no longer from Ahl Sunnah. He will be outside of the folds of Ahl Sunnah. He'll be excommunicated. However, if a person Not only does that, but he also denies Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu an being a companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then this can potentially make him into a kafir, because the Sahabiyat, the topic of discussion regarding the companionship or Sayyidina Abu Bakr being a companion, him Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu an being a companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is proven from Quran al-Kareem. I can't remember the exact verse in Quran al-Kareem. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down a verse, and this was relating to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the one who accompanied him in the cave, which that being Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu an. And if a person is to deny this, which is a obvious, clear-cut proof of him being a Sahabi, a companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and if a person denies this whilst knowing that it's in Quran al-Kareem, then he is basically denying the verse of Quran al-Kareem. And a person whoever denies Quran al-Kareem, he is no longer a believer. And in that way, he will no longer be a Muslim. And that is why Usul al-Din and Aqeedah and faith and matters of al-Ijma' are very, very important. And when we refer to al-Ijma', we only refer to the Ijma' of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'. Okay? We will refer to the Ijma' of our scholars. We won't refer to the Ijma' of other people. For example, we won't agree with the Ijma' of the Shia. We won't agree with the Ijma' of, well, the modern so-called Ijma' of a Salafiyya, or such as Ibn Taymiyyah, when he went against al-Ijma', then we wouldn't do that. For example, there was, I think it was incidents in the past regarding Ibn Taymiyyah where he said that a person shouldn't go and visit the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Madinatul Monawwar with the intention of, just doing the ziyarah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And ulama very, very harshly refuted him, because he went against al-Ijma'. And even certain matters like istighatha and tawassul, matters which were agreed with consensus of the ulama, with al-Ijma', he disagreed with, and because of that, certain fitna in the ummah was created, and because of that, the ulama also refuted him for that as well, such as Taqiyuddin Subki, Shaykh al-Islam, Taqiyuddin Subki radiallahu anh. So, yeah. Crazy world out there. Yeah. Basically, don't go against al-Ijma', don't go against matters of Usuluddin when you clearly know that this matters of Ahl Sunnah. Don't get yourself excommunicated from the religion, maybe. So, yeah. And make sure that you know your Aqeedah. And this is exactly why we are doing these series, inshallah. So, people can benefit, inshallah, and they are aware of the matters of the religion which are further upon them to know, regarding the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, regarding Quran al-Kareem, regarding Rasulullah, regarding the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and regarding the Sahaba and the afterlife and the day of judgment and everything else. So we left off the part of the text where it said, we were talking about how this هذا ذكر بيان عقيدة أهل السنة والجماعة على مذهب فقهاء الملة أبي حنيفة النعمان بن ثابت الكوفي وأبي يوسف يعقوب ابن إبراهيم الأنصاري وأبي عبد الله محمد بن حسن الشيباني وما يعتقدون من أصول الدين وما يدينون به لرب العالمين. So basically talking about how this text itself is basically on the faith, on the Aqeedah, on the beliefs of the pious predecessors such as Abu Hanifa radiallahu anh and his students and the ulama of this madhab, of the Hanafi madhab. And the next thing which Imam Tahawi writes in his matan is نقول في توحيد الله معتقدين بتوفيق الله. And that we assert regarding Allah's unity, that we say regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's unity, believing by Allah's enablement with the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, إن الله واحد لا شريك له ولا شيء مثله ولا شيء يعجزه ولا إله غيره. Basically, the first point of the text which Imam Tahawi writes is إن الله واحد لا شريك له. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one and that he has no associates with him. Now, when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one, there needs to be an explanation here that when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one, we don't mean this in terms of numbers. Because the number 1 is preceded by the number 2, and the number 2 is also preceded by the number 3, and etc. So this is that whole discussion of the multiplication factor, that a number, when you mention a number, then there are also other numbers in existence. When you mention Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is 1, we don't mean it that, for example, that 1 in terms that it's half of 2, because that would create a problem within the argument of regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being 1. So we don't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is 1 in terms of number. What we mean of him as being 1 is that he has no associates, and that he himself is the creator alone, and there is nothing else other than him who is the creator, who is a deity. And when we say that la sharika lahu, that there are no associates for him, we mean this in 3 regards. The first one is fi dhatihi, in his essence. The second one is in his sifat, fi sifatihi, with in his attributes. And the third is fi af'alihi, in his actions. And when we talk about the wahdaniyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is a sifat salabiyya. And what we mean by this is that this is such an attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this denies any other partner or the possibility of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala having a partner in creation. Because that would be an irrational argument, right? For example, if a person is to say, a certain fulan person is to say, for example, that there is another God besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this would raise the question that, for example, that okay, in creating the world, for example, creating the whole universe, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the universe. What was this other God doing? Because if one God is to choose a decision regarding, for example, creating the universe, creating the world, then the other God would have to agree to this and would essentially be submitting his will and essentially agreeing with the other God's decision. And that wouldn't be his own decision. He'll just be simply agreeing with him, and he'll be submitting himself to the other God's will. And such a person, such a thing, an entity which submits to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or of a God, then that thing itself cannot be the creator. It cannot be a deity. It cannot be worthy of worship. It cannot be a God. But we'll come to this later on, inshallah. So coming back to what we said regarding la sharika lahu, regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala having no associates, what we mean by la sharika lahu in terms of his zat, fi dhatihi, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is 1 in terms of his essence, and he has no other partners in creation. So he has nothing else other than him. Okay, it's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself alone, and he has no father, he has no mother, he has no son, he has no child, he has no spouse, he has nothing. Unlike, for example, the Christians, what they believe, for example, they believe in the Trinity. They believe in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And that itself is polytheism. It's believing in more than one deity who's worthy of worship, which has no position or has no basis in the religion of Islam. Because that would be shirk, and shirk is kufr. And so such a person who does shirk, he's a kafir, he's not a Muslim, he's not a believer. And when we say regarding his sifat, fi sifatihi, la sharika lahu, fi sifatihi, so he has no associates in terms of his attributes, we say that the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like each attribute, they are 1 and alone. So for example, regarding ilm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's like an attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowledge and power. So ilm and qudra. We don't say regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, he has ulum, or like he knows such thing and then such thing or such thing. No, what we say regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is 1 thing alone. We say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ilm. Okay, he has knowledge, and within that, the ma'lumat, the things that he knows, they are all unlimited. So in that way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything of the universe, and he has unlimited knowledge, and his knowledge and the things that he knows are endless in terms of his knowledge, al-ilm. And the same thing regarding qudra, the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't say, for example, that he has power over one thing, such thing, such thing. And even though that thing, maybe what you're trying to say is accurate, but what we say regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attribute is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has qudra. He has power. And within that, the maqdurat, the things that he has power over, they are unlimited, they are endless. So you're not really putting a cap on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge or his power or any of his attributes. And this goes for all of his attributes. So regarding ilm, regarding qudra, regarding him living and being forever established and not having a beginning, etc., and everything else. And the third point is regarding fi af'alihi. So when we say la sharika lahu, that there are no associates for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we say fi af'alihi in terms of his actions, then what we mean by this is that when he creates, when he does anything, he does so alone by himself, and he doesn't do this with any assistance of himself. Okay, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is creating, for example, this world, this universe, everything that we have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he creates, he does not take assistance from anyone else or anything, for a matter of fact, and he does it all alone, and he has no associates in that. And if a person doesn't believe in this, then again, that is shirk, and a person like this is no longer a Muslim. He's not a believer. The second point is says here وَلَا شَيْءَ مِثْلُهُ, and that nothing is like him. Nothing is like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah, this is a very heated discussion. Well, it's not even a heated discussion. It's very simple. Unless you're part of al-Wahhabiyya, then it should be very simple to understand. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is nothing like his creation. Okay, it says in Quran al-Kareem, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ, and that there is nothing like him. Okay, there is nothing like him, and he is the all-hearing and he is the all-seeing. Now, when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarding his attributes, there are certain things in Quran al-Kareem. For example, it says Yadullah. The word yad is used, and the word yad itself in the Arabic language, this translates to the word hand. Okay, the word yad literally means a hand. However, when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his attribute, and for example in the Quran al-Kareem it says Yadullah, we don't translate the word yad into hand. We don't say the meaning is known. Unlike certain sects, we don't say that the meaning is known. We just say we leave this meaning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We affirm this, we affirm that it says Yadullah, but we don't even translate it. We just agree to it that this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed in Quran al-Kareem, and this is what we are supposed to believe, and nothing else. We don't even commentate about it. And this is known as tafweed. So we just accept the verse like it is, and we don't say anything else. And we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever he has said about himself regarding his attributes, we accept it, but we do not liken him to the creation. Because certain people, they will say Yadullah, and then they will say that the meaning of Yadullah is known. They will say that the word Yad literally means a hand. And they will say things like Allah has a hand, but he does whatever he needs to do with his hand because that's a hand, and this is befitting of Allah, but however, it's not like his creation's hand, which is really stupid. But again, here we are. So it's very important that we know that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about his attributes, we don't liken him to the creation. Just like this, for example, you have stupid people who will say Allah has a hand, Allah has two eyes, Allah has feet, and in some cases people even go to say, I think it was Ibn Uthaymeen or Fawzan, I'm not sure. One of them said Allah jogs. Yeah, it's a crazy world out there. That's all I'll say. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from such fitna of doing tajseem and falling into anthropomorphism. Yeah. Because we need to say, this comes under the whole discussion that you can't liken Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to something that is contingent. Because that would basically mean either we are making the contingent into divine, or we are making the divine into the level of being contingent. Or basically the whole argument is incoherent. Because something which is contingent is something which is created. And this would cause, and if you were to make something contingent into divine, then this would cause tanaqud, and this is incoherent, and this would not befit Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in many cases, a person like this would do kufr and get out of the folds of Islam, and he would no longer be a believer. And carrying on, regarding the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but I spoke about Yadullah, we need to understand that when in the beginning there was no such concept of ta'wil. Okay, you wouldn't translate, for example, Yadullah as the power of Allah or certain things. In the past, the ulama, the Sahaba who knew Arabic, who were the most fasih and the most baligh ulama of their time, they never translated the word yad into a hand. They never said that this word, the word yad, wudiya al-iman al-maqsood, it's not denoting upon a specific meaning. They just left it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this was the case for several years, until we had the fitna of anthropomorphists and mujassimis who came and likened Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to his creation and said that Allah had a hand and Allah had certain things and whatnot. They said madnesses. And because of that, due to necessity, the ulama had to do ta'wil. And ta'wil there's a whole discussion regarding how it shouldn't be done. However, due to necessity and to protect the iman and the faith of the awam, ta'wil would be done. So the common Muslim wouldn't fall into doing tajseem of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He wouldn't liken him to the creation. Because then, if you imagine it now, for example, if you wouldn't have ta'wil, and the fitna of tajseem of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was to increase, then you'd have 2 billion Muslims who would be saying that Allah has a hand, Allah has 2 eyes, Allah has a foot, and Allah jogs. And if they were really to believe this, then you would question yourself as to whether these guys are even Muslims themselves. And because of that, to protect the people from falling into such fitna, ta'wil is done. So yeah. And even then, there's a narration of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu an, where in his time, I think it was in his caliphate when he was ruling, when a person was, someone reported to him that there's a person, Fulan person, who's explaining the verses on Mutashabihat, who's explaining the verses such as Yadullah, etc. And Sayyidina Umar called him over and he asked him, like, what are you doing? And he said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I'm explaining to the people what this means. And Sayyidina Umar beat him with his stick. And then the guy learned, he's like, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I know my lesson. I will never explain these verses to people again. Because these are very dangerous things. You're putting people's iman at risk. So yeah. And this is exactly what Salafi are doing nowadays. But alhamdulillah for Ahl Sunnah, we don't fall into such putekam. Because we don't want to be excommunicated from the religion. That's not good. And again, Aqeedah is the most important thing even before Amal. Because if a person has the wrong beliefs regarding Allah and still prays 5 times a day, does everything, but his own i'tiqad isn't right, then none of his actions are being accepted. It's all futile, it's all useless, and nothing will happen. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us guided on the path of Ahl Sunnah, and to protect us from such fitna, and for us to be protected from the people of bid'ah. Now the third point, which I will be covering now, which will be the last point, it's where it says here, وَلَا شَيْءَ يُعْجِزُهُ وَلَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُهُ. Okay, so وَلَا شَيْءَ يُعْجِزُهُ. So this is basically saying that there is nothing that will make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala incapable of carrying out an action. So there's nothing that can weaken Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because let's say if there was something that would weaken Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then this would make a person question the attribute of his qudra, of him being the most powerful. Or such an entity which is the most powerful cannot be made weakened by something else. Because then that totally defeats the argument of it being the most powerful. And for Allah, for a deity to be worthy of worship, it needs to be the most powerful. And that's why we say that there is nothing that can weaken Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'll actually go into one more point regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's what we believe regarding him. Okay, so yeah, it says here in the matan, Qadimun bila ibtida'in. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is eternal without a beginning, and he is da'imun bila intiha'in, and he is also everlasting without an end. And it also says here, La yafna ولا يبيد. Okay. Actually, we'll keep it until دائم بلا انتهاء. So basically, we're saying here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is eternal without a beginning and He is everlasting without an end. Now we need to understand that us as creation, everything that we do, we walk, we go work, we wake up, we sleep, we conversate with people, everything that we do is limited in the whole infrastructure, in the whole medium of time and space. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is eternal and He will never die, He will never perish, He will never end. And He always existed without a beginning. And this may be very hard for the common mind to fathom, and for any normal person to fathom in the beginning anyway. Because again, everything that we do is restricted to time and space. So we can't imagine something to not have a beginning, because everything that we know, everything that we've seen has a beginning. A human has a beginning. Starts off as a sperm cell and as an egg cell, becomes an embryo, then becomes a fetus. It stays 9 months in the womb of its mother, and then is born, and then it lives its life, and then it dies at the end of its life, how many years that may be. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is free from time and space. And this is something that we just need to accept like it is. And it may be very hard for certain people to understand, certain people to comprehend, but I'll say it like this. Think of, for a thing to exist in such a way that it's not restricted to time. So, for example, the words that I'm saying right now as I speak, this is the present tense. And as I'm speaking, the words that I had just mentioned 5 seconds ago, 10 seconds ago, they are becoming the past. And the words that I'm going to say in the next 2-3 minutes or the next 20 seconds, they are the mustaqbil, they are the future. Now imagine not having a past, not having a present. Well, you are in the present at all times anyway, but imagine not having a past or a present or even a future, and just being in one existence itself, in being in one state alone. You can't imagine that, because everything that you do, everything that we do, it's within the boundaries of time and space. And even when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from space, this is again hard for someone to even understand, because for someone to say that there is nothing and there is no space, that itself could be imagined as a space. And this is a whole philosophical argument and everything, but you don't want to delve in it too much. But it's hard for us to imagine for something to exist without being in a space. So that's why we say regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He exists without being restricted to time, and He exists without being in a space, in a certain space. So we basically say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has existed like He has always existed, free from time and free from space. And this is where I will keep it up for today, inshallah. And we'll stop here for today, inshallah. And we will carry on from next week, the matan, where example where it says regarding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never cease to exist and He'll never perish. We'll carry on from that next time, inshallah, from next week's session. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to remain steadfast on the beliefs of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And if I have made any mistakes, then for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive me and my mistakes, inshallah. And remember, Allahu mawjoodun bila makan. Sallallahu ta'ala ala khayri khalqihi wa nuri arshihi Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.